Hello everyone and welcome to another incredible game from the European Team Championship. On board 1 it is Ivan Saric representing Croatia, and on board 1 for Azerbaijan it is Teimour Radjabov, world number 14, and it's a really wild game. I mentioned in the previous video that it was the one that I started watching first, and although it seemed like it could have ended abruptly on move 20, then it could have ended abruptly on move 29, it actually went into a 4 knights endgame, and that's simply impossible to calculate. You could follow maybe one knight, okay, on the board in an endgame. It's best to just, move them and see what happens. So let's see this wonderful game. Ivan had the white pieces and he opened with e4, as he usually does. We have pawn to e5, knight f3, and knight to f6. We have knight captures on e5, the classical variation of the Petrov defense, d6, and knight back to f3. We have knight captures on e4, and now pawn to d4. Other moves are also possible. One of my favorites is knight to c3. If you haven't seen it, do try it. Tends to give a very nice game, especially for blitz. d4, d5, we have bishop to d3, and now bishop to f5. So going into the classical attack, we have castles, bishop to e7, and rook to e1. So many games in the database, nothing new being played here. We have castles, knight b to d2, and knight goes back to d6, offering a trade of light square bishops. So knight to f1, Ivan says okay, but if you capture, I will capture with the queen and get a free development, and that's exactly what happens. Bishop captures, queen captures, and pawn to c6. Now we have bishop to f4, and now knight to a6, shifting the knight over to c7, pawn to g6. And it's a very well-known position. It has been reached in some very top tier games. For example, Fabiano Caruana had it against Mamedyarov. He played knight to g3 here and he won a game. Also, Berkic defeated Maxim Matlakov. He continued with knight to e3 is a move that, for example, Wesley So played against Yang Krzysztof Duda. Their game ended in a draw, and the move that Wesley So played is actually the top move recommended by the engine. But Ivan goes for knight to g3. It has never been played before, and it is now, as of move 15, that we have a completely new game. Now, I'm pretty sure that Ivan had this position somewhere at home, and that he maybe even knows that knight to e3 is a top engine move, but that maybe knight to g3 is the second engine move, but it's much trickier. So maybe that's why he played it. So okay, we have knight d to e8, and now rook to e3, going for a rook lift, preparing to bring the other rook into the game. Bishop to d6, and here Ivan trades with bishop captures, knight captures, and the rook a to e1, nicely doubling up on the e file. We have rook to e8, offering a trade of rooks, and now rook to e5. Ivan says, all right, let's trade, but then I get to advance this pawn all the way to e5. And here, there are a couple of moves you could consider, like maybe knight to c4, going after the rook here, or maybe queen to f6, but Teimour played pawn to h6. And now I'm going to show this because it's a classical game, and it's a very long variation, some 11 moves long, but white does get a winning advantage with knight captures on f7. But it's very tricky. King captures on f7. If you capture with the knight, then just queen captures on g6. So king captures to guard the pawn. Now pawn to h5. You are threatening queen captures on g6, and now look at this beautiful defensive resource, queen to g5. You sacrifice the queen, so you will get the rook on e1 as well. Rook captures on e1 with check, king h2, and h captures on g5. Queen captures on g6, and king to e7. Queen to g7 check, king to d8, and now you will start playing with the passed pawn. So pawn to h6, pawn to h7, pawn to h8 is coming, and it looks like black is just getting destroyed, but there is sort of a defense. Rook e7, queen to g8 check, king to d7, and now pawn to h7, trying to give up the queen to get another queen into the game, but now knight to f7. So what do you play here? The rook is of course defended, you cannot capture it. Knight to f5 goes after the rook, and this is now the winning idea. Rook a to e8, you cannot move the rook, otherwise you lose the knight here, so you have to defend. Knight captures, king captures, and now h8, queen even. The knight captures, you will capture on g5 with check, and you have this position where it's a queen against two knights and the rook, but you are also up two connected passed pawns, so objectively this is winning for white. Would you win it? Very hard to say. But yeah, it's a very long line, but I really wanted to show it since it's a classical game. But Ivan does not go for it. He goes back with knight to f3, and now queen to f6. And when I say this is the strongest line, I allowed the engine to crunch the numbers for every move up until maybe depth 45, and then this is the line that it came up with. So I'm guessing it is the strongest one. Sometimes, okay, maybe if you really allow the engine to go deeper, deeper, and deeper, it will change the evaluation to maybe a different line, but that's not often the case. Once you reach like depth 50, it stays at a certain line. So, okay, pawn to b3, we have knight to e6, and now pawn to c4. So, playing on the queen side now, improving the position, we have pawn to h5 and pawn to a4. We have rook to e7, and now c captures on d5. C captures, sort of offering the d5 pawn, but if Ivan captures it, knight to f4 will win material. So what does Ivan do? He plays queen to d2. He very nicely sidesteps this fork, and now rook captures on d5 is pretty much an unstoppable threat. There's no way to defend this pawn. You cannot move the knight, as the rook on e7 would hang. So Teimour forced to give up this pawn. Ivan captures it, and now knight to g7. He's down a pawn, but he wants to trade, and he wants to hold this being down a pawn. So Ivan trades, rook captures, and queen to h6. We have knight d to e8, and here Ivan goes king to h2. And this is I don't have an explanation on what king to h2 does, other than maybe it's a waiting move, because knight to g5 is winning for white. But again, it's very tricky. After knight to g5, you have to see very, very deeply that after knight to e6, you will attack the queen, and once the queen moves, you simply trade into a winning endgame, as you are up a pawn. Rook e5 now, the rook on e7 is undefended, so you have to be careful. You have to defend the rook. Knight captures, and now after, let's say, rook captures, and f captures, you get this a knight and pawn endgame where white is up a pawn, which is, well, most of the times enough for a win, but objectively this is a winning endgame. But he goes king to h2, and this sort of loss of a tempo, probably there is an idea behind king to h2, maybe just, prepare for entering the endgame so the king is closer to the action, but this now allows Teimour to get the knight to e6, and now the same idea no longer applies. Now if you go knight to g5, simply knight to f8, and there's really no danger here. h7 is defended, and that's pretty much it. Now knight 3 to e4 can be even met with rook captures on e4, and after knight captures, there's even queen captures on h4 with check, picking up the knight on e4 after at the end of this variation. So queen to e3 instead, and now we have queen to f4. Teimour just offers a queen trade. Ivan goes rook e5, and Teimour trades. Queen captures, rook captures, and now knight to f6. Rook to c3 and rook to d7, going after the pawn here, so Ivan defends it, and now king to g7. We have knight to f1, pawn to a6, preparing pawn to b5, and Ivan stops it, pawn to a5. So knight to d5, and now knight to e3. We have rook to d6, and now pawn to g3, pawn to b5, and now captures and captures. We have rook to b4, knight captures on b6, rook to b4, knight to d5 now attacking the knight here, and rook to b7. We have rook to b6 now, offering a rook trade, and rook captures, knight captures. So now you have this madness of an endgame where you have 4 knights on the board, and good luck following that. So king to g2, Ivan of course starts bringing the king into the game, and f6. We have king to f1, pawn to g5 now. We have pawn to d5, advancing the passed d pawn. So for the moment, this is the only passed pawn on the board, and that makes it incredibly valuable. So pawn to c5, knight to c5, we have knight to d4, defending the pawn here, and king to f7. We have king to g2, pawn to a5 now, trying to get rid of the b3 pawn, and then you're going to tend to the d5 pawn. King f3, we have king to e8, and now king to e2. We have pawn to a4, b captures, knight c captures on a4, and now knight to b5. So the knight and pawn nicely controlling the 3. Knight to c5, and now king to f3. We have king to d7, and now knight back to c3. The pawn is nicely defended, so you do have the luxury of actually moving the knight. Knight to d3, and now knight to e4, going after the f6 pawn, but knight to e5 check, king to g2, and g captures on h4. We have g captures, and knight to g6, now going after the h4 pawn, and now Ivan could go for, and after the king moves, let's say knight g6, and you are up 2 pawns, but still, knights are incredibly tricky bastards, and it's very, very difficult to win this. So Ivan does not rush it. He plays king to g3 first, pawn to f5, and now knight to f6 with check. King to d6, and now he plays knight captures on h5, which is actually a draw. the objectively winning move here is pawn to f4. You have to stop the advancement of the king to e5, whereas your pawn on d5 is nice to move the knight and start advancing the past h pawn, or rather soon to be past h pawn. But Ivan captured on h5, and now comes king to e5, knight to g2, and now knight captures on d5. We have king to g4, and now this is a draw, but you have to play very, very precise moves in order to draw this. Here's a very nice target practice for you. Study the endgame and you will be able to solve this. Feel free to pause the video and find the only move that doesn't lose the game for Teimour while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on always studying the endgame. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight to e3 with check. That's how you do it. Now, it doesn't matter what white does, even if you capture material, f captures, and knight captures, you simply go knight captures on h4, and that's it. Once king captures, you have two knights and the king against a lone king, and of course, you cannot checkmate the black king with two knights and a king. You can if your opponent helps you, but if your opponent actively tries to avoid checkmate, then it will not be possible. It is possible if black would have one pawn. And then there are some positions where you are able to use tempi against the pawn and the king to force the king into the corner and then checkmate him. But you know, with a lone king, it is simply not possible. So that's how Teimour could have done it. But he played king to e4, and now Ivan's position is once again winning. Pawn to f3 check. King to e5, and now king to g5, and now there is no way to try something like that. So you could try with knight captures on h4, but it does not work. So knight to f8, we have knight g captures on f4, grabbing that pawn, knight to e7, and now knight to f6. We have king to d4, and now pawn to h5. So of course, there are still hopes of sacrificing material and maybe getting a draw. If you can maybe eliminate this pawn, then this pawn, it's possible, but not from this position. King e3, knight 4 to d5 with check, knight captures, and now king captures on f3, leaving Ivan with only the passed h pawn, but it is enough. Pawn to h6, king to g3, and now knight to f4. We have king to f3, knight to d5, and now king to g3. We have knight to f6, and now knight to e6 with check. King to f5, and now knight to d4 with check. King to g6, and now Radjabov trying the oldest trick in the book, knight to e6. So if Ivan maybe plays pawn to h7, you can play knight to f8 check and win the pawn here, which would make it again a draw due to insufficient material. But after this knight to e6 move, knight to d7 was played, and it was in this position on move 76 that Teimour Radjabov resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The f8 square is defended, so that means h7 is coming. That's all there is. You could give a check here, but after king to f5, there's nothing more to be done. Knight to d5, h7, and after knight e7 check, king g5, there's no way to guard h8, and once white gets a queen, that's it. So yeah, very, very nice game by Ivan. Like I said, he was winning on move 20, but I mean, what a line then on move 29, but again, what a line, and then he had to win this 4 nights endgame against Teimour Radjabov, who is world number 14 at a rating of 2745. After this game, he dropped two places, so now he's world number 16 on the live ratings list. But still, I mean, that's quite an opponent to take down. And with Marin winning on board 4 and Ivan winning on board 1, Croatia has defeated. Let me just check the margin. Yeah, Croatia has defeated Azerbaijan. With a draw when I was following it, but yeah, seems Mamedyarov proved to be too strong to hold. But yeah, then also that you can maybe draw a game even if your opponent has 2 knights and you have nothing but a king. But yeah, all in all, very nicely done by Ivan. So yeah, once again, really hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Kevin Clark, Camilo Hiche Schwarzhaupt, Randall Ingersoll, Stefan Rakocevic, and Andreas Rosenthal for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.